Right now, somewhere on Earth, someone is cracking a chicken egg into a pan. It's happening about 100,000 times a second. 3 billion eggs, every single day from one single species of bird, while almost every other egg on the planet, the ones your ancestors actually grew up eating, never makes it anywhere near your plate. That's not a small detail. That's one of the strangest wins in the entire history of food, and by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why it happened, and it has almost nothing to do with taste. Here's where it gets interesting. Your ancestors were not picky. Ancient humans were collecting ostrich eggs over 60,000 years ago, single eggs large enough to feed an entire family in one sitting, with shells so thick and durable that people didn't just eat what was inside them, they turned the empty shells into canteens, engraved them with patterns, and carried water across the desert in them for days at a time. One egg was food, a container, and a piece of art, all at once. Long before there was ever a chicken on a farm, people were eating whatever egg they could physically find and reach. Bird eggs, fish eggs, reptile eggs. If it laid an egg and a human could climb to it, dig it up, or wade out to get it, it was food, full stop. So somewhere between then and now, the human diet went from eating almost every egg on Earth to eating essentially one. And once you actually start pulling that thread, it stops looking like a food story and starts looking like something much stranger. Let's start with the ones you'd probably still eat without blinking. Duck eggs. Quail eggs. Both still show up on menus today, and both are genuinely close cousins to the chicken egg. Similar size range, similar way of cooking them, nothing about them should feel foreign to you. So far, this makes sense. Different bird, same basic idea. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. Take that same duck egg, let it develop for a few weeks before it hatches, and you get balut, a partially developed embryo eaten by the spoonful across the Philippines, Vietnam, and Cambodia, by literally millions of people who grew up finding it completely normal. If your stomach just turned a little reading that sentence, that reaction didn't come from biology. Researchers who study disgust have found that this response is learned, not instinctive. Children raised eating it show no reaction at all. You weren't born finding that disgusting. You were taught to, so gradually you never noticed the lesson happening. Keep that in mind because it's about to matter a lot more than you think. Here's a twist that makes the whole picture even stranger. If this were actually about which egg is objectively better for you, the chicken shouldn't have one at all. Duck eggs contain more vitamin B12, more vitamin D, more omega-3 fats, and more choline than a chicken egg does. Goose eggs and quail eggs often measure out ahead too. If nutrition were driving this decision, you'd be eating duck eggs for breakfast right now, and chicken eggs would be the rare specialty item. That's not what happened. Which means whatever picked the winner here, it clearly wasn't your body's actual needs either. Now take an egg that should, by every logical measure, disgust people even more, and watch the reaction flip completely. Fish eggs. Caviar doesn't get quietly tolerated. It gets served on ice at the world's most expensive restaurants, sold for thousands of dollars a pound, treated as the single most prestigious food you could put in front of a guest. Same basic biology as a duck egg turning into balut. Completely opposite reaction. Whatever is deciding what we find disgusting, it clearly isn't the animal, and it isn't the science. It's something else entirely. So let's go further out. Sea turtle eggs and crocodile eggs were eaten across huge parts of the world for most of human history, right alongside everything else. Then, in the space of a few decades, they nearly vanished from the plate. Not because people stopped liking them, but because conservation laws stepped in and made harvesting them illegal almost everywhere, as those populations collapsed toward extinction. In parts of northern Australia, crocodile eggs are still legally harvested today under strict quota, which tells you something important. The line between food and forbidden was never really about the animal. It was drawn by whoever had the power to draw it, at whatever moment they decided to draw it. And it gets stranger than laws. In parts of Mexico, ant eggs, called Eskimos, have been eaten as a delicacy since before the Aztec Empire existed. To the people who eat them, they're a luxury food, harvested carefully and served with real ceremony. To almost everyone outside that region, the idea sounds unthinkable. Same eggs. Same nutrition. Completely different verdict. depending entirely on which culture happened to raise you. Here's the part that changes everything. The reason wild bird eggs largely disappeared from Western plates isn't really about taste, or disgust, or even law on its own. It's about a bird you've probably never thought about once in your life. A bird named Martha. Martha was the very last passenger pigeon on Earth. A century before she died, passenger pigeons existed in flocks so massive that witnesses described the sky going dark for hours as a single flock passed overhead, likely the single most numerous bird species that has ever existed on this planet, numbering in the billions. And within a single human lifetime, people hunted them and harvested their eggs and nestlings so relentlessly, using nets, guns, and even burning the trees they nested in, that a species counted in the billions collapsed all the way down to zero. Martha died alone in a cage at the Cincinnati Zoo in 1914, the very last living member of a species that used to darken the sky. That extinction didn't just end one species quietly. It shook an entire country badly enough to change its laws. It directly led to the Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1918, which made it illegal to harvest wild bird eggs across the United States, a law that is still in force today, and one of the biggest single reasons an entire category of eggs simply vanished from what people were even allowed to eat. One bird's extinction quietly rewrote the rules for every wild egg that came after her, for over 100 years and counting. So if wild eggs got legislated off the table, and cultural disgust is something we're taught rather than born with, that still leaves one obvious question. Why chicken, specifically? Out of every domesticated bird available, why did this one completely take over? The answer is almost embarrassingly simple, and it has nothing to do with the egg itself. The wild ancestor of the modern chicken, the red jungle fowl, wasn't even domesticated for food in the first place. It was domesticated for fighting, for cockfighting, thousands of years before anyone particularly cared about its eggs at all. Egg production came later, almost as an afterthought to a bird people were originally breeding to be aggressive in a ring. But once humans started deliberately, selectively breeding chickens specifically to lay more eggs, generation after generation, the numbers stopped being close to anything else on the table. A wild bird typically lays a small clutch a handful of times a year. A modern hen, bred for exactly this one trait for thousands of years, lays around 300 eggs annually, a number that isn't natural at all and wouldn't exist without deliberate human breeding pressure applied for millennia. Nothing else in the running was ever remotely close to that kind of output, and once one bird can outproduce every competitor by that many multiples, at that kind of scale, the outcome stops being a fair contest and starts being inevitable. And layered on top of all of that, religious dietary law, in traditions like kosher and halal practice, shaped for entire generations what was even considered acceptable food in the first place, long before any individual person ever got the chance to decide for themselves what disgusted them and what didn't. So here's what actually happened, laid out end to end, without the romantic version. Your ancestors ate nearly every egg they could physically find, from every animal that laid one. Somewhere along the way, disgust got taught into some of those eggs so gradually that nobody ever noticed the lesson happening. Conservation law legislated others off the table entirely, almost overnight. One bird's total extinction rewrote federal law and erased an entire category of food by accident 100 years ago, and the law is still standing today. And the bird that did win, won by a numbers game bred into it deliberately over thousands of years, not because its egg was ever actually the best tasting, the most nutritious, or the most natural one available to you. The chicken egg sitting in your fridge right now isn't there because it earned the spot on merit. It's there because almost everything else that could have competed with it got hunted to extinction, legislated away by a law written before your grandparents were born, or quietly trained out of you before you were even old enough to ask why you felt disgusted by something you'd never actually tasted. If you think that's strange, wait until you see what happened to the animals we used to eat, and simply stopped, for reasons that have nothing to do with taste either.